Hey guys, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are and now things, welcome to a new vlog. Reached Leh around 12:50 in the afternoon, checked into the hotel, this lovely resort, the Ladakh hotel. If you remember, I stayed back in October when I did the solo ride in Ladakh, and also back in 2021 when we came with the gang. There's always a lovely property to stay here in Ladakh, and the reason I'm here, if you have noticed from the background, is that lovely BMW R1300 GS. This is the media ride event that's happening in India. I'm super excited to check how this rides and performs tomorrow in these lovely mountain sections, and that's where most of the GSs end up coming whenever an owner buys one. It's like the dream destination for a GS, and this is the perfect place to test ride the GS. That's a triple black, and there's also a blue. These are not the top end model, the green and the gold rims that we saw internationally. That's the most expensive one with the radar. These don't get any radar, but this does have some accessories like the Akrapovic end cam and also the off-road protector for the light. We'll talk more about how this performs and rides in the mountains when we go for the first ride sometime early in the morning tomorrow. But for now, I'm just gonna stare at this because in some angles it really looks much prettier than the old GS. The old GS is the 1250 GS is a very industrial design. They've sharpened out a lot of things here, and it looks menacingly sharp. In some angles, I really love the design. Some, like the front, I'm still not a fan of in person. Maybe it can grow over time, but in photos it didn't so much. In person also, I don't know, it's a personal thing. But the rest of the body panels, the sharp lines, the overall silhouette is just lovely. Okay, time for the media ride of the BMW R1300 GS. You need to shake this key to let the ignition on because they don't want the battery to die. Smart thing. If it's just sliding here, it will drain the battery. Let me quickly warm up the bike. Nice. You see the boxer shake. Good morning from Leh. Remote key battery at 50%. That's okay. You might have recognized this territory and the route, part of the media ride. I think this is the last day of the media rides. Look at these snow-capped mountains, lovely setting to test ride the BMW R1300 GS. There are a few things that I'm already noticing which are quite impressive, because my last memory of a 1250 GS was Shiva's bike when we did that short breakfast ride. So I have little bit of context to what it is. First, let me ride, understand this bike a bit more, and see what's different, what's better of this compared to the 1250, because on paper there are quite a lot of changes, huh? And then when we get to our first spot, which is the Varila base camp, we'll talk more about this bike. So let's get going. Boy, I think this is going to be the biggest change to the GS lineup in the last decade. There's a short ride that we did, not more than 30 kilometers so far, but early impressions, GS is always known for being that do-it-all bike, but now they've made it more sleeker, sharper, sporty, edgy. It has a different vibe to it now. Let me give you a brief glimpse of how the power is delivered. Just in second gear and only at 6000 rpm it can go all the way up to 9000 rpm. So we can imagine how much they've bumped the performance of this motorcycle. It has 145 horsepower, 149 Newton meters of torque. Being a multi-owner, I can tell that this is coming closer and closer to being a sporty tourer while being still capable off-road and in different terrains that we come across. Forget about the design, we'll come to that later. We'll talk about the engine and the changes that are done. It's 6.5 kilos lighter. Also, the cylinder heads are much higher. That's because the transmission is coming underneath the engine. It gives more room for the rider, and also the cylinder heads are more even, more symmetrical now. So more leg room, and you can feel it while you're riding the motorcycle. Downshifts on this are so smooth that I didn't expect that. Usually they're a bit clunky. All BMW gearboxes, the quick shifters are not that great. But here, I'm enjoying the downshifts. Even the engine note and the exhaust note, they sound more growly. It didn't cross third gear in this intentionally just to see how it sounds. And in 6000 rpm, this was hitting 100, 120. They just want to go and go. There are 5 models for India. I think there's the triple black first model because I don't think this gets ride height adjustment. All the fancy features with the center stand and all. But this is good enough motorcycle for a lot of people. And in this motorcycle, you get 5 modes. Rain, road, dynamic, enduro. And you can also select Dynamic Pro and Enduro Pro and configure it to your liking, where it manages the throttle response, DTC, traction control, and ABS. So a lot of customizations available, but in terms of just the way the riding modes felt, I only had a chance to ride it in rain and dynamic. I felt in the rain mode, the bike was a bit twitchy. The throttle response can be controlled or managed a bit better. In dynamic, this was the smoothest I experienced, and I think if you're doing a lot of touring with occasional off-roads and bad sections, dynamic works brilliantly. On a whole, the throttle response is sharper, edgier, and as I said before, this is coming closer and closer to being more sporty, more agile. I think that's the theme that they're going for. They've also done a lot of changes to the frame, the front and the rear, again going down the theme of weight savings. This bike is, believe it or not, 12 kilos lighter and lighter than my Multistrada V4 Pikes Peak. 237 kilos, whereas the Pikes Peak was 239. Not comparable bikes, but just saying a bigger ADV, which is more into off-roading and touring, is lighter than a very sport touring bike. Aesthetically, they've done a lot of changes. There's a different bit of coating to the cylinder heads. This triple black has a different feel. Mechanically, visually, tons of changes that we can't cover in a small YouTube review. This needs a long-term review, which we'll do. In terms of suspension, which is the next biggest change, 1250 GS is always known for the telelever suspension. What it does primarily for the end user is when you brake hard, the front doesn't dive, and it still retains that, and they have made it much more stiffer, much more sturdier. It's not like it's a hard or sporty suspension. It dives much lesser, and also they added flex with the handlebar elements here. There's an entirely different way of mounting the handlebar to the forks. The handlebar is mounted here away from the springs. Previously there used to be 2 joints, now it's here. This made it much more stiffer, but they also wanted to add a flex element, and that's where the small metal plate, you see this? It's very rigid, but this flexes under load so that you still have some flexibility. A lot of engineering has gone into this, but definitely adds to the way you experience the motorcycle when you're on the road. The way this is cornering and handling in the corners, it's still not the sportiest. For that you have to go for the XR, but for a GS, like the way this is handling all these bumps, don't stop, and the way this is turning and handling in the corners is amazing. Hardly felt that bump. High speed manners of the suspension is just excellent. It's soaking up every thing that comes in its way. The rear is still a bit softer for my liking. I think that's intentionally done for a lot of people who do tours on these bikes. That's the increasing segment of people. People buy these big adventure bikes and tour. Very few come to off-road, and in that sense the rear suspension is also sorted. They have something similar to combi braking, much more advanced. They call it full integral braking system. So what happens is when you're engaging the front brake, the rear is also engaged slightly, and it's also opposite. When you engage the rear, even the front is engaged. That was not there on the 1250 GS. What I noticed with that system though is when you press the rear brake, the front dives. The telelever suspension somehow is not working the same way when you only use the front. I am a very heavy front user, and for me the braking is sorted. Really sharp brakes, Brembo brakes, but BMW branded. I have no complaints on the brakes, but it's just that the feel when I use rear brake. So imagine someone you going off-road and they press the rear brake, the front slightly dives. That is something that I found not so comfortable. The ride's on the slightly stiffer side. I mean, the damping can be adjusted, but it's automatic. But in the corners, there's a bit more stiffer than the 1250 GS. Now I'm wondering, would people buy an XR if a GS can be as sporty as this is? Extremely careful on those dirt patches. I mean, this can handle, but this bike is carrying speed deceptively well. Before you realize, you can be in a 100 or a 120 in one of these corners. I think this has the perfect balance of being sporty and comfortable, especially in the guards. I was having so much fun. I was just grinning all the way because this has such dynamic feel to it. When you want it to be sporty, it is like that. When you want it to be comfortable, it is there. It has certain interesting features to the suspension. One is the ride height adjustment. Under 30 kilometers per hour, the ride height can go down by 30 mm. So the standard seat height is 850 mm. It goes up to 820 mm. There is a higher, taller seat version which goes up to 870. Same 30 mm. The ride height would go down. So whenever you want to put your feet down, it is just comfortable to do so. But in enduro mode, you can fix the ride height, because when you're going off-road, you don't want the ride height to be going up and down. And in that regard, that's a very smart thing that they have done. Besides having such nice features, there's also one more which I think will transform how you park this bike on the center stand. It's basically engaging the battery to lift the rear and then the front. Let's see how it works. First, turn the ignition on, put the center stand. You see the movement? Done. The bike feels like it's automatically pulling back, so you don't need to put so much effort like you do on the 1250 GS to put it on the center stand. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. This is no more an elephant in terms of the size. This is one of the sleekest in terms of looks. Take a look at the design, the headlight. It's hard to get over it. Maybe for some it will grow over time. For me, I was hoping it does. The DRL does look nice in the rear view mirrors, but in person, the overall theme that these guys went for is sleeker, sharper, edgier design. That works when you look at it from the side angle. So imagine someone building more leaner mass and not bulking up. That's what happened with this. There's more muscle and less fat. And especially in this black color paint scheme, it just looks tiny in the photos and videos, but in person, it's still as big as the old one. It doesn't look small and tiny, yeah? That's why I'm saying looks are deceiving in pictures and videos. Now let's talk about some of the interesting and nice tidbits about this bike. So this has this central locking for all your panniers and top case with the key. You don't need to fiddle around with each of those locks. Very smart, and these Vario cases are known as Vario because the size is variable. And then you get this two-piece seat, but it looks like a one-piece. You see the pattern here. This is also cushion, soft cushion. Another thing that they kept in mind while engineering and designing this bike. So people have a lot of room here. The small metal plate. You see this? This is probably one of the reasons why they wanted to move the ignition button from here to here. They could have had it here, but you get the key here, the key fob. One problem with this key fob is, if this is tilted like this, I can't remove the key. Anyway, minor niggle. You'll get used to it. This is not a big deal. I've had the bike for, what, 150 kilometers. This has become intuitive. You see the engine on and ignition are both here. So for me, that's intuitive enough. Anyway, talking about buttons, you see this is the new button. Gone are the suspension preload adjustments and also quick settings to the traction control, what you get here is something called the sandwich button. I don't know, don't ask me why they named it as a sandwich button, but let me show you how it is. Let's turn the ignition on. Previously we used to have a lever here to adjust the windshield. On the 850s it's the lever, and on the 1250s it's the dial. I always preferred the lever because it's just one quick step. You had the heated grips button here. It made everything easy. I still prefer that, but here in case you wanna increase the windshield, you can select different menu options once you click the sandwich button. Currently it's controlling the grip heating. Once I select it by pressing the jog dial to the right, if I use the up and arrow button, it will change the heating elements. I can put it to level 3. You can also use the sandwich button to control windscreen. I prefer the old way because today morning I had to switch between grip heating and windscreen quite a lot. I didn't like it. I wanted quick access to that, but it's again minor inconvenience that you can get over with. They also have a new navigation system that's built on Android, but the maps are developed by TomTom, so you don't get Google Maps, but it's one of the most slickest navigation units that one can buy. Few things that I am not a big fan of: the indicators are inbuilt in handguards. Imagine you crashing on an off-road patch, the indicators are done. Same case with the rear, the stop lights and the indicator lights are integrated. In case you break both of them, you don't have any other stop light. But one thing that they did smart with the windshield here is you get 2 extra holes for the screen, and you can adjust the height of the screen without buying an entirely new windshield. It's electronically adjustable and also at 2 different levels. So that's a lot of customization there. You get the DRL and you get the projector unit in the middle with I think 21 or 27 LED elements, which includes cornering functions too. A lot of tech that goes in there. No moving elements though, unlike the last one. So that is something maybe good for reliability. But in terms of the visibility, they say it's bright. It's brighter than before. But the thing with GS owners is they'll end up buying auxiliary lights anyway. So doesn't matter how bright this is. The look of a GS is completed only with auxiliary lights. On a whole, I would rate this bike an 8.5 out of 10. The 1.5 that I'm taking off is for the design, and also in India, people love big stuff. Be it SUVs like the Fortuner or the Adventure Tourers, they like bulk. Problem with this bike is visually, in the photos and videos, it might look slimmer, but it's not big like the GSAs. People buy a lot more GSAs for a particular reason. So in that sense, I'm curious how the GSA version of this ends up being. If they make it big, I'm sure people would pick the GSA, but on its own, this is a very sporty, agile, sleek bike, which fits my nature quite a lot. So if I'm in the market to buy an adventure bike, man, I would be very confused because this is sporty, fun, and also comfortable to tow. They've maintained the ease of use of a GS while adding a bit more sporty, fun nature to it. Thoroughly impressed.